What's good, people? So UFC Freedom 250 just concluded a couple hours ago, and honestly, I personally believe that the event lived up to the hype. I think the overall performance factor of it was really what helped sold it. The live music was fire. Yeah, there was a little bit more of a delay in between the fights at times, but it still ran very, very fluid. It wasn't like how some boxing events can be, where it feels like they're dragging the fights a little bit too much just to have a performance in between. So it was still very much effective in motion. It felt very special when you actually looked at the crowd. So overall, I would think that this was a glaring success. It also was a night of absolute finishes, which is what I expected. Like when I looked at all the matchups, I personally expected every single one to end in a finish within the first two rounds. And ironically, the fight that a couple of us thought would have ended the fastest was the longest one of them all, which would have been the main event. Which, just to get into a quick recap of how everything ended up going now. Starting with the beginning, we had Lopez versus Garcia. From my perspective, I just said it straight up. You can go look at my video. I thought it was an absolute mismatch. And I think that's what it built into. I personally expected it to start off a lot more hot and heavy, but it looks like Lopez, perhaps a bit overwhelmed in the moment initially. I think that he was a little bit soft on the gas in the beginning, and he kind of had to open up more and get more comfortable. But once he did, it was just domination. When I say domination, I mean it lasted like a subsequent 2 minutes after that. Lopez turned up the heat and cooked him. It just, without anything, despite taking a couple shots along the way himself, rather than after he built his comfortability, he just completely overwhelmed Garcia and finished him. Same thing moving on. We had Bo Nickel versus Kyle Dawkins. Another fight, just thought it was a mismatch, and you saw Bo Nickel show it that way. Bo Nickel went in just as I expected, utilized his grappling to get that initial momentum, and then, as I've said before, Bo Nickel striking his constantly improving, and he just started just hitting him with overwhelming heavy shots. Once he got stood up, and Kyle Dawkins kind of just wasn't ready or prepared or really necessarily comfortable in that situation, and he got really, really overwhelmed, and then just subsequently just finished and dominated. It was again just another easy fight. Both of these were just absolute mismatches. When we move on, however, now you're looking at Mauricio Huffy versus a Michael Chandler. It's a fight where you have one fighter that you can see the idea in his mind, which is Michael Chandler. You see the idea that he wants to wrestle more, that he wants to push that pace, but you can also see the paranoia. You see the fear. I know we all crack jokes and expect him to be like, yeah, the guy who gets finished, myself included. I think that it is time for him to retire, but these moments are really what helps drive that home. Because you see him, he takes very atrocious shots for somebody with the wrestling pedigree that he possesses. And then you saw that Huffy gave him a little bit of opposition with a takedown defense, but it wasn't the level of he should have been that reactive and that scared. But the shots that Huffy responded with were slightly connecting before it was fully clean, and that was enough to just have Chandler being very, very, very concerned and worried about them. After built a little bit more, connected a little bit more, Chandler ended up spending that whole round just running from Huffy, and eventually something landed and connected. And when it did, it put Chandler down, and it put him down pretty bad. Initially, you saw there was a point where it looked like his neck, his head just dropped, like he had a moment where his neck fully was just loose. Pause after he had gotten hit. So you can just see that he got beat up pretty badly. I think he should retire and just leave the game for the people who are actually capable of winning a few fights at this point in their career. Moving on, we had the Derek Lewis against Josh Holkett fight. This one, I thought this one was probably one of the more obvious ones, but I see a lot of people actually were pulling for Derek Lewis. Not just I'm not talking just from a desire standpoint. I'm talking from a standpoint of you actually believe Derek Lewis would have been the one and was the one who was more capable of winning in this situation, which just isn't the case. Realistically, Derek Lewis has been fat, slow, and lazy for quite some time now, as in the past few years. Yeah, he still has that crazy power, and yeah, he's still a tricky fighter, so he can catch you. Like, but that's the misconception. A lot of people perceive the fact that he can catch you, and when he does catch you, that puts you down to him still being a good, capable fighter. That's not what has happened. That's not his reality. What happens is Derek Lewis gets tired very easily. He has poor movement. He has poor grappling and takedown defense. His biggest aspect is his power and his trickiness. That's it. Without those two things, he's food. Even in his fight against Talison Teixeira, if Teixeira was more patient and more aware, he could have ended up eventually finishing Derek Lewis. Because Derek Lewis's cardio is so bad to the point that if you ran around in a circle in the ring for long enough, he'd probably get tired staring at you. It's that atrocious. And then in this case, Josh Hokett, who is one of the much more physically conditioned fighters in the heavyweight division, he has that incredible speed. He has a wrestling pedigree. And as I've said before, I think his shtick is atrocious. I personally dislike it a lot, just as I dislike people like Kobe's shtick. However, I still think he's a very capable fighter. He's a part of that new generation of heavyweight that the UFC is pushing and bringing. And you see that in the quality of his performances. They are very much trying to get these guys in so that they can flush out the old guard. But a lot of these guys are still incredibly popular. So you're trying to basically have people watch them for their popularity, hoping they win, and then have these newer fighters kind of steal some of that shine by beating them and then now appearing in more people's eyes. And I think Hokit did that successfully. Did exactly what I expected him to do. Basically, just out technical Lewis. A lot of people thought that just because he fought Blades the way he did, he was going to do the same thing with Lewis. He's not stupid. The shtick may be dumb. He might act stupid on purpose to garner more views, but Hokit is a fairly intelligent fighter when it comes to the actual art of fighting. Yes, he paced himself. He was very cautious with how he handled Lewis, even in moments where he very clearly had him hurt. He didn't just rush in and risk getting knocked out. He tried to build, and while he got touched a couple of times, but none of them were clean, and you could see that even then he was very wary of the power Lewis possessed. Just bided his time, constantly built throughout the fight, and just took over once it was glaring, and just really put Lewis out and put him down. I think Derek Lewis is another fighter who should retire at this point. Him, Bam Bam, a lot of these old guard, the ones who are no longer capable of me, just go ahead and like retire. Like it's time. Like at this point, you guys are kind of pacifying the division by still having people play KTL. It's time for us to continue focusing. I said it before, I'll say it again. By this next year, by next year, near the end of the year, I'm expecting the heavyweight division to look very different because it is constantly being built up. We'll get more on that when I get to the co-main event. Moving on, we had feature main event. We had Sean O'Malley versus Ayman Zahabi. Once again, it's just a fight where I just thought this fighter was better. Sean O'Malley was just better. I said it in my description, my pre-fight analysis. O'Malley is more of a sniper. O'Malley is more targeted, more experienced, he's more used to these moments. When you look at it and you actually look at the fight, yeah, based off stylistic, you can be like, all right, then Ayman is more defensively sound. Yes, he's more aware. He has the experience. He's on a bit of a run, but I feel like every time a fighter goes on these little streaks, fans tend to forget everything about every other fighter. The streak isn't some proof of concept against a higher level fighter. The streak is just a testament of potential, testament of accomplishment. But If you are a better quality fighter than any other fighter I've gone up against and won against, then no, I can't then say, well, I'm on the streak against these other fighters. So obviously, that's not how it works. That was the mistake a lot of fans made with Fluffy Hernandez versus Sean Strickland. You have to actually look at the fighters themselves. And when you look at the fighter himself, Sean O'Malley was just much more accomplished, much more experienced, fought much higher level competition, has in were in a lot more varied situations, had to overcome a lot more, not just physically but mentally as well, and were more of had a stylistic advantage, faster, sniper, more technical. Overall, he was just better. He was just better. And Zahabi didn't have any specific trait that overwhelmingly dominated O'Malley. It was a great strategy that he attempted with the leg kicks. Definitely, despite what O'Malley said in his post-fight interview, definitely was being effective, but eventually O'Malley just found the time and got him out of here. Moving on to the co-main event. This is 105. These last two fights are the only ones that the only predictions I got wrong on the card, but they align. This co-main event aligns with some of what I had saying for my concern. I ended up going with Alex Pereira. However, I said it very clear that this is the hardest fight for me to pick. Hardest fight for me to pick because I view it as a genuine pick and fight. Genuine 50-50 depending on skill set. When you look at it, not even necessarily a 50-50, it's more so that their stylistic skill sets and their capabilities make it very difficult to read how they would have actually looked against each other. When you look at Cyril Gahn, said it very clearly. He has that speed, he has incredible footwork. You look at Alex Pereira, he has that power, and while he has that unique footwork and he has that timing, that's a little bit different. And you saw so I wasn't sure how they would pair well against each other. While Pereira had the power that could translate, Gahn is actually a heavyweight. Gahn actually fights heavier fighters. Gahn actually has beaten and finished heavier fighters who are able to put more weight and strength and size on him, and while also maintaining his footwork. Gahn is the one that actually had a lot of big advantages as far as key roles for this type of matchup. Despite that, Pereira's power is the great equalizer, and unlike Derek Lewis, he isn't just dragging his feet. He's not, though he's capable of movement, and because of the awkwardness of his movement, and then his leg kicks, that if they were able to be a good, big enough factor, would end up affecting Cyril Gans's footwork and could potentially have changed the entire dynamic of that fight, which is the reason why I personally ultimately went with Alex Pereira. But Cyril Gans's victory, I know some people, for some reason, might find this surprise, but no, like, don't let John Jones's easy victory over Cyril Gahn delude you into thinking that he's some wash easy matchup, or your hatred for Tom Aspinall. For if anything, for me as a fan of Aspinall, this victory has justified and vindicated him that much more. Because a lot of people viewed Alex Pereira as this god type figure that only John Jones even or Francis Ngannou even had a prayer of comparing to him. But you see and watched him get dominated for the most part, if we're being honest, by a Cyril Gahn. So now you are no longer able to delude yourself into thinking that. And even when you compare the rounds, Alex Pereira faced significantly more damage from Cyril Gahn in the first round without Cyril Gahn fouling him than Tom Aspinall took while Cyril Gahn was constantly actively fouling him. And that's obviously with the exception of that final eye poke that's put Aspinall out for months. But at this point, I'm kind of happy that Gahn won, to be honest, even though I was expecting Pereira to. And I'm a bigger fan of Pereira. But I'm kind of happy that Gahn won because we can actually now see that official rematch. And I think that there'll be a lot more hype. There will be a lot more objectiveness going in. There's still going to be people going to just pendulum just swings the other way. But with Gahn having beaten Pereira so handedly, as well as the time to cool down, amongst other things, I feel like a lot more people are going to be more objective, like, okay, this should be a competitive fight rather than a blowout, or rather than should be seen as some type of negative just because Aspinall wasn't just killing him from the beginning. Definitely looking forward to see how the conclusion of that ultimate matchup will affect the landscape of heavyweight, especially with that ranking. That top 15 rank is now constantly shifting, and that top 10 and top 5 are all looking very different. Moving on, we have the main event, a fight that a lot of us thought was a foregone conclusion. To be honest, I thought Gaethje was going to get dealt with within the first 2 rounds, and it almost happened. However, I looked at Ilya Taporia. I was like, all right, then does he look heavier? Like, once the conclusion had arrived, I went back and looked at Topuria. Did he look heavier? Did he look out of anything? Did he look like a factor? And to be honest, he didn't. He was doing his thing, almost did what he usually does as far as just building into a fight and then dispatching of somebody as he builds his momentum. He had real chances to take out Gaethje in the second round. But when I rewatch it, I think there are a couple of key factors that really shifted the tempo. I think one, the fact that Justin Gaethje probably hits harder than anybody that he's dealt with, while also being a little bit more durable at the same time. I think that was a key factor. In the same way, I believe that if Max Holloway was able to hit as hard as Justin Gaethje, he would have beat Topuria, because he was evading Topuria a lot better. He was actually being a lot more efficient of a fighter as far as strike and response typing than any other fighter that Topuria, including Volkanovski, that Topuria had fought up to that point. And then even when you saw Volkanovski in the initial fight, despite everything that was concerned, Volkanovski himself was also very efficient while fighting against Topuria. So I actually do believe Topuria would have lost to potentially Volkanovski, but definitely Max Holloway if both of those fighters had hit as hard as Justin Gaethje did. And the reason why I say that is when you look at that matchup, you see that Topuria was getting hit by Gaethje, and that's why his face was scratching up so fast and so easily. But the hits he was taking was affecting how he entered. He ended up being a little bit slower on pushing his offensive. He just tried to do what he usually does. I think he just wanted to get it over with, because of the magnitude of the White House and then how long he'd been out. I think he thought it would have been pretty easy. So he just pushed an offensive. And while he was pushing said offensive, Gaethje, who started off, as I had said before, I think that if Gaethje does the same strategy he did against Paddy, he's going to sleep. And I think we saw Jay Gaethje make adjustments. Boxing was a lot crisper, striking was a lot sharper. It was a lot less sloppy. That sloppy stuff would have gotten him put out. Instead, he made the adjustments. It was a lot sharper. And initially, you saw those strikes were landing. He was moving constantly. He never planted his feet. He never just dove forward unless there was an opportunity to. And he saw some type of opening and weakness. And you saw Topuria, even despite all of that, Topuria was getting tagged a lot more, and he was building a lot more wear and tear while trying to push his own offensive, while also building a lot of fatigue in the process, which I think is what was so different compared to other fighters that Topuria has gone against. When you look at all of that, fighters ended up trying. When you look at all of that, Topuria ended up changing his strategy a little bit in the second round. He became a lot more initiative. He pushed the aggression a lot more, started getting to his spots, throwing his combinations, really softening Gaethje up, which was how he eventually got him down. But I think, once again, Topuria made a bit of a rookie mistake, which he got overwhelmed by the moment and he wanted to put on a show, which is why he tried to go for that grappling submission. I think Topuria could have gotten Gaethje out of there in the second round if he did strikes. He went for the grappling. He went for a submission. He wanted to say, look how dominant I am. And then Gaethje found it in his soul to keep going. Whereas if Topuria had just kept pouring it on the round when Gaethje is hurt and discombobulated and unable to properly protect himself, I think Topuria could have got it done. This fight ended a bit similar to how Rainer the Ritter versus Allen ended up concluding, which is it ended on the stool. It ended as a massive upset. It ended from a fighter who earlier on had really big moments, but then kind of just got worn down along the way due to accumulative damage and exhaustion. It ended in a way that made some people made a lot of people shocked. But I think that for Topuria, he literally was just not respecting Gaethje as much as he should have. He was not respecting Gaethje as much as he should have. Building a lot of lactic acid, got exhausted a lot faster. He ended up compromising himself a lot more. And by the time he tried to make the adjustments, his body was already in a compromised state. How do I think a rematch between the two would go? Honestly, I think that Topuria would probably be a lot more dominant in the rematch. However, I'd like Justin Gaethje to retire on top. Let's not have this rematch. So he got to speak to his family. Good, but you've accomplished everything. At this point, Justin Gaethje is the answer to the what if for Dustin Poirier. Like they've had very similar careers. At this point, Justin Gaethje is the one who, when put in those positions, actually got it done. Congratulations to him and his family. But I think you should finish and end up running away with house money. You got an opportunity that honestly is undeserved, from my opinion. However, prior to the situation with Max Holloway, you had deserved that title opportunity. And I don't think you would have won against Islam, personally speaking, because I believe the strategy would have been different. Sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need one loss in a bit of an absurd situation to make you make an adjustment that you won't make the same mistake again. Gaethje, you've won. You've accomplished everything that you needed. You're a legend in the sport. You've overcame every demon and doubt and failure that you had within your career. With this moment, culminated it by once again winning at a once in a lifetime type MMA event. Take house money and go home. Cash your checks in, get your money, go home. Retire, sir. Retire on top. Retire. You vacate the belt. It won't be Topuria. Shit. They wanted Topuria and Paddy because of a money fight for so long. We can have them getting it. But for right now, we've been saying that Armin Sarukin should have gotten this opportunity for some time now. Topuria is going to need some time to retire. Paddy was in a bit of a car wreck when he fought Gaethje last time. But Paddy and Armin got a little issue with them, history themselves. Let's put Paddy versus Armin for that belt. Or you can put Armin versus somebody else. Armin versus Oliveira rematch. There's multiple different aspects you go. I think people would be down for both the Armin versus Oliveira rematch. But we can determine that this is the chance. Armin spent this last year he just really building his social cred. Last year and a half, just building his social cred, really changing the people's perception of him. Let's utilize that. Let's capitalize that. You know what I mean? We got an opportunity. Gaethje, please retire. Armin, take the shot. Please don't pull out near the end again. Let's get this chicken. Let's get this stuff done. Overall, fantastic, phenomenal event. Very, very interesting conclusion. Very unexpected conclusion. But that's what the sport's all about. Shit. I thought that I was going to get a clean sweep. And then that second to last fight, I was like, all right, then I can understand that conclusion. But the last fight, I think everyone expected that to be the most guaranteed fight of them all. But it was a great day, great fighting event. Y'all let me know what y'all think. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.